So let's retry. Where is this? Yeah, everything fine now? Perfect, perfect. So I was there where I thanked Dirk's team and also the European Commission for having us here. We have been quite a long time already included into Ameye 2030, and we're contributing also on the Material Manifesto and further down the road in the Material Commons. I was thinking quite a moment about how I should address the transition and introduce ourselves also a little bit in the overall theme. But I stumbled recently on an interview I've seen quite some years ago from the 1965 from Marshall McLuhan. And I thought in some ways that's probably the glue which lies in between. I would like to take a small moment to read what he was saying in the interview with Frank Kermode. In an extreme way, one might say Gutenberg was the last phase of the Neolithic Revolution. Gutenberg plus the Industrial Revolution that followed was a pushing of specialism that came in with the Neolithic humans. Then he finalizes with these words, and then suddenly we encountered the electricity and electromagnetism, which seems to have a total different principle. And I'd say these principles are the reasons why we are all here now. And that's also why for BEDA, it's quite important to be from the industrial design perspective or the design perspective in global, be here and help and assist in finding ways for these totally different principles. That's also one of the reasons why BEDA participates in the Material Commons. But who is BEDA? It's 50 plus members distributed in whole Europe and 28 European countries and 23 European member states. We're founded in '69 and based in Brussels. And our members include publicly funded design organizations, professionals, and trade associations. Why we're doing it? We want to take stock and leveraging impact, looking ahead in the European community. And BEDA assists in framing and solving the challenges in climate change and sustainability, digitalization of our common futures, and the design for growth and prosperity in Europe. We focused on these four main pillars, and we try to contribute to all initiatives which would like to work with us on one hand, and also on the other hand, try to represent the whole design community in these initiatives on a European level. Today, we've tried to give you 3 different inputs, also with the help of Dirk and his team. And first will be the Basajaun project from Andreas Rudenå. Please, Andreas, the floor is yours. And it should work just fine, I hope.
Thank you very much. Let's see now. Okay, I will present now the Basajaun project. It's an Horizon 2020 project, and I will specifically talk about the digital parts, which is also why I'm here. The Basajaun project is a demonstrator in the Commons, and we are working with connecting the full supply chain from the forest to wooden building, and that is a huge challenge in which I realized when I heard about the Commons project, thanks to Michaela. I realized that this is something that is super relevant for us. when we are trying to connect all the partners. So in the Basajaun project, we are building full-scale demo buildings built with innovative materials and components built with wood, and we are then of course delivering these buildings, and it's a very very applied project. So this is also very interesting for the small task force working with the digitalization, that we're tracking all the materials and components along the supply chain, and going to play this up so that we can show how we can make a digital supply chain representation, a dynamic one that can be used for materials. So here are some screenshots of this is the northern demo building in Finland, and unfortunately this is not going to be built, but due to some increasing material costs. This one is from southern France. It's going to be built, and it's being built as we speak. So these are some really beautiful renderings. So you can see the details. There are a lot of wood components, and drilling down a little bit into the buildings, you can see here some exploded view of the material and components. So we have some SIP panels, not maybe in this picture, but structural insulation panels, and some wood foam, wood-based insulation, and some facade profiles made of composites. And what do we have more? Yeah, we have some yeah, that was basically it. Yeah, here we have some example of the facade system with the insulation and the facade profile. But what I want to get to here is that these when talking about the data representation on these kind of components, we really want to know how the assembly and disassembly instruction will be represented. Because if you think about the life cycle perspective of buildings, we would like to know how we can disassemble this kind of components in the future, and look into the circular perspective. So I'm going to go down now a little bit more into the data representation of these buildings, since that is what we are working with. And here we have the typical BIM models, and only here in this kind of situation we have the collaboration between different disciplines, and different actors are going to work together in the design process of designing this building. And this is, if you know, pretty complicated actually, just with the interoperability inside of this domain for iterating fast, doing design and doing calculations and simulation. So already here we get into problems, and when we are trying now to collect from the supply chain perspective, we need to think about time. So here's just an example of the erection planning for the glulam beams. And here we can see that there's an order here, but looking at from the supply chain's perspective, I'm really trying now to make sure that we get the timing data into the model. Zooming out a little bit, looking at the sawmill perspective, you can see here from the forest through the sawmill to the building, avoiding some of the factories for example, glulams, just for the boards here. There's a lot of data collection and a lot of flows that we need to cover for the circular potential. So we have bark and chips and sawdust and stuff coming out from the sawmill process. But again, we will have a lot of data to cover. And now we are leaving the building domain and coming into the manufacturing or processing industry. So we have a lot of different domain that we need to cover. So I want to show you a little bit example of a small exercise that we did, and it was actually not the meaning from the beginning, because when you're starting a project and you need to connect the whole supply chain, you're looking into how can we do this? What kind of information model do we need? And we are looking into the OPC UA and the information models and so on. And we actually what we did instead is to try to see if we can co-create information model. But in this example, it's more like like an exercise together with the partner to try to understand how information modeling works, because you have to understand that the building construction industry is quite traditional, and going out there and talking about ontologies and the information models, they don't really know what is it and why do I need it. So we did this exercise where we have this backbone and we are sending up data signals like test messages from their data, and we're trying to see if we can align the semantic information in this data to see if we can find connections playing. Let's say we are playing around and practicing, and then when we are looking at a graph that is getting more and more complex, and we are trying to visualize it as a flow representing the supply chain. Some people really, they understand now why we should have the semantic information, and from this, let's say, session, we can start to discuss how we create an information model or maybe an ontology, but it's an incremental process. So this is one of the very interesting insights I get from working in this project, to think about the process instead of thinking about the top down or creating something from scratch that we should follow. So instead we are trying to iterate in this process. So now I want to show you some examples of rendering from these this data set, let's say, where we know that we have the information model, let's say. When I talk about the information model, in this case, I talk about JSON LD and linked data, and we are working with the NGSI LD format, looking into that a little bit, but in the end, it's it works really good for this, let's say, very applied case, but we didn't still connect it to an ontology, but we are working on the IOF supply chain a little bit ontology. I mean, to try to make a connection to that one. So I think that will be really interesting to see how we can align map that one. So here I just want to browse through some examples on how we can visualize the graph data with the context of the 3D models to make it more clear for the people that works with the supply chain on what they are looking at. So we are moving away from the graph and kind of aggregating and trying to see the supply chain here from left to right, from forest to building, just looking at volumes, just looking at volume flows into the building, material maps, how we can explode the building out, and looking at the different kind of materials entitled building. And this is from the IFC, let's say, ontology, but it's the express schema. And they get quite complicated, these maps, but in the end, they are dynamic. So here is one example on how the data looks when you are playing it up, let's say, from beginning to end, connecting all the parts in the supply chain when they find their way, let's say, to connect to each other through these links. But I want to finish my presentation then with looking at this kind of next step of infographics-based supply chain visualization, which is moving around a little bit. So we are trying to figure out how we can do this a little bit more, let's say, easy to understand, but also exploring if this is useful to combine the graph data with visualization and showing that this is a living thing. So in the end, my question then is thinking about the design process. How can we work with design together with this kind of advanced digital systems that, like digital twins, that are really collecting data all the time? And you have, if you're going to do circularity, if you're going to find these circular flows, maybe you need to be embracing more the available formats, materials that are that you have to your disposal to find the optimal flows. For example, existing buildings, what do you have and when do you have? So this would probably affect, or this is the question, does it affect the design process? And how do we work with digital twin design process? Do we check out data from this digital twin and then work and then try it and apply it and simulate it and so on? So this was just a quick walkthrough in the Basajaun project, and yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, so we also want to zoom out a bit to look into this from a very big design perspective, giving you an overlook of a very simplified design aspect of this. So my name is Lars Eriksson. I'm representing BEDA, but also Jonkoping University. I must say something about Jonkoping. You know what Köping means? It's Kaufplatz, marketplace. So if you visit Sweden, you will come to Jonkoping, and then you come to Norrköping, maybe you say, I've been here. No, it's Jonkoping, Linköping, Nyköping, Söderköping. So Köping is the Kaufplatz, just to mention, marketplace. And Jön comes from the little small, what do you call it, flow down to the lake of Vättern. So that's about Köping. We are here, we started this actually by discussing this, finding something which is like, this comes from IDEO's model for desirability, viability, feasibility. And I think the interesting part is like we are very good in knowing what to do, how to produce things, and finding viable solutions for it. But I think when it comes to this new thing is in a way not new, but when it comes to this with the sustainability aspect and the desirable aspect of this, I think for us, from design perspective, what is new is the focus on what we want, what is the desirable future when it comes to sustainability. And just give you a glimpse of the background. I think when it comes to product design, we handle like form, color, textures, materials, sound, combining that or to our sensation perception, our senses. So you normally sight and touch when it comes to material. I think materials become much more interesting or bigger interest now because product consists of material, and now it's when it comes to sustainable material, that's totally new. I mean, we really have to rethink when it comes to be really sustainable into materials. And also, I think the challenge for us, so that's why we come in here, as Mark said, why we are here is like we want to contribute to, from the design perspective, from BEDA perspective, what is the desirable future? Where do we want? What do we want out of this? And just to simplify the design processes, it's like in one hand, you have like a design intention, in one hand, and the other hand, you have the customer acceptance. And let's just focus on the material issues. So some pictures showing images of different materials, and you understand this, like different context means different things when it comes to materials. So let's say, for example, you're working with car interior and you say as a design intention would be like, I want a plastic surface for car interior. It will be like a little bit soft, like this texture, flexible, maybe, sustainable, resistant for water and scratches. Sustainable in the sense that ingredients maybe from fish nets from oceans could be nice, with a feeling of puppy dog ear in the end. That's the customer acceptance. And let's say we do that. We follow all those flows like this from production, material, treatments and everything. And in the end, we find a material. We put it in a car and we say, oh, nice. This is like coming from fish nets. Yes. And it feels like a puppy dog ear. Yes, then we succeed. But how do we get there? And this is a very simplified model, a very sort of messy one. Of course, we have control loops in the different levels of handling of material and things like that. But in a way, it's still a bit messy because we're looking for, not for how things are, but how things ought to be in the future. So exceed the customer acceptance, not only fulfill, but exceed to really, wow, this is new. Do you see what I mean? It's like that's the challenge when it comes to design. And what I would say is new then is this, if this is a model for how we can simplify explaining a simplified process, design process, double diamond we call. So we have the discover, define, develop, deliver stages. And you have to define the problem space where we define, discover and define. I think it has expanded a lot. Do we really need to contribute and collaborate all to define those what, who, where, when, why, and do it before we do the design. We can't first, like we did before, do the design, and then like say, okay, like this surface for a plastic, and then we find out it's not sustainable, and then we have to loop. So I think the challenge is now everyone has to work together on this problem space, in this problem space, to do the definitions right before we start the design. And that is a bit new for designers that wants to like have this feeling of puppy dog ear surface in the car. But I think we need to do it together. And also the designers need to have more knowledge of material properties before they start. So there you come in with those sort of databases and how to make it available for people. And I think another challenge would be that people, when it comes to sustainability, and we talk about users, and we can have the definition of user or customer in different ways. But when designers talk about users, we normally talk about the end user, the one that buys the cars, drives the cars, sort of. And then sort of we are the users advocate in that sense. And then we have some challenges, I would say. That would be like trying to identify enablers and hinders in this system. So, and we don't really know yet where are the enablers, and that is changing all the time because the more information we get, and the more customer information will be available, the sort of customer acceptance will change, and then that will change, reflect on the design intention. So it goes hand in hand. So we have to be really adaptive to what the customer really want in the end, and that will change because sustainability has been such big issue even for the users, we know for sure. So we try to formulate that in how will the ecosystem and marketplace be designed to be viable and useful for the stakeholders in the material community, and how will the ecosystem become feasible, financially and commercially sustainable for stakeholders, and how to share data in a financially and commercially sustainable way. And how should the system be designed to achieve a desirable position in the European context? And I think that's like what we said, what are the challenges for the design community? But also this, like, I think when discussing with customers, meeting people in industry, textile industry, car industry, plastic industry, metal industry, they have those things. How can we know for sure that this is sustainable, and how do we communicate this? And also, how do we combine different like sustainable material? If we find a material that can replace leather or chromium or something, how do we know how to combine that? Because that's something new. And how if we should be sure, if you should be able to change material in a product that you know works today with high customer acceptance, with sort of exclusivity and things like that, what happens if you change the material? You need to really ensure that those new materials actually has the customer acceptance. Otherwise, you don't dare to change. So that is something you really need to know. And also how to produce those sustainable materials. There has happened a lot in the processes, you know, as expert in this field. Okay, thank you very much. So, oh no, so we go back. You have another presentation before. First switch.
Might need help here. There's Teams over here. All right, so I'm here to talk about briefly about Quantifactum and transparency. So it's one application where we could use, definitely can use ontologies and comments. So I'm the CTO of Quantifactum. We are a startup that has created a SaaS platform for production transparency. And it originates, so production transparency is really about how, when, where, and by who an article is made and giving that information to end consumers. So Matthias was actually the person that had the idea. So that's my co-founder. He is the CEO. And it started all at the family business Mirabel Slabbnick, where he was one of the founders. So that business is all about luxury linen, and they wanted to tell the story about their production in Bruges in Belgium, and why their product was so good, and why it was so responsible in terms of craftsmanship, environmental responsibility, fair labor, all these things. And the idea to create Quantifactum started when in 2013, Rana Plaza, there was an accident that a complete factory was collapsing with plenty of people in there, really too much in very bad conditions. So the idea of the family was that, hey, we know everything about the products we make and produce, who has worked on what item, at what time, what were the steps behind it. So then they just could tell everything. They had everything in a database already at that time. So it was just a matter of giving that information in a transparent way to end consumers. So that's where it all started. So, of course, that's in a really confined environment just for that business with just the production in Belgium, in Bruges. So with Quantifactum, we wanted to go way further, give information about the complete supply chain, about all the materials used, the life cycle of the product, and so the labor, and really with the focus on fashion and apparel. So this really for me is as a start already when we created the first version of the product. I had the idea that we had to use a graph database just because of the need to draw the supply chain and to gather all the information required. So from that perspective, also for me, it was a really nice thing to learn about the onto commons and also about this event today about the materials. So the data comes from different sources, a lot of different parties. So we really have to arrange for good terminology. to have the same meaning in what we gather of information. There's also different sensitivity of the information. So in apparel, they are really reluctant to share the information, and they, yeah, from that perspective, we also need a lot of protection and to be sure that they want to give the information. And there's also different levels of certainty even. So we need ways to be able to verify things and to say we know for sure about this, or we are not sure about this information. So on a very granular level, actually. So, but I also want to say about today also what I learned is that there's still a huge gap. It has been confirmed this afternoon with several presentations that it's being worked on, but still. As I said, the fashion industry is very reluctant on sharing data. There's a lot of smaller companies also in the fashion. They are totally unaware about the topic of and the need for ontologies. This is completely, even my co-founder had issues understanding the concept of ontologies, while, yeah, for us it might be obvious. All data domains gathered should have specific ontologies. Yes, so of course this is already said. We also have or need the involvement of the fashion industry to help define the ontologies. And this is a very hard thing because they are very constrained in time and the production efforts that they need to do. It's a very hard business nowadays. And there's a lot of difference in terminology between those smaller SMEs. So also one of the other things that I learned today and I want to mention also is Onto Commons seems to be very much created from the scientific communities that are better able to understand the concept of ontologies. And so less from an SME viewpoint. That's also something that should be addressed actually to get to continue. So that's my presentation. All right.
Okay. No, it doesn't. No, it works. Yeah. Okay. Just for the last 2, 3, 5 minutes, I would like to ask my colleagues over here for a short Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions you have at this moment, and we would be happy to give our utmost best for answers.
Next one.
That's the next one. No. That's strange. Yes. No, it works. Any questions? Or is the apero pulling?
I'll jump in. I'll just like Andreas to tell us a little bit more because he will be with us for the horizontal workshop in Oslo, and where we are going to be focusing a bit on more on the interfaces to ontologies. And we are having a big IKEA team. Lars, I don't know if you are aware of this. There's a big IKEA team that's coming, 6 of them, and they are looking at it from the client side, let's say. Like what do knowledge graphs mean for their clients in terms of IKEA interglobal systems. And Andreas is coming into it both as a use case in Onto Commons from the Basajaun project perspective, and also we wanted to see if that sort of approach to interfaces with data can also be tested for knowledge graphs and for ontologies. So Andreas, what do you think is the biggest challenge? We are having a whole week of prototyping in June. This is a really big challenge. We're just kind of putting ourselves out in terms of design and programming and delivering prototypes. What do you think is the biggest challenge, or what are the biggest challenges for that week?
Yeah, well, I see what we want to present should be something that is very innovative and kind of, we set some kind of high goals, I think, for ourselves to show something maybe a little bit different. So I think that will be challenging, because I think that showing something different can be let's say it can be perceived like nothing that is as usual. So it can be perceived a little bit critical, but in the end I think we have the possibility to work with interfaces in new ways. There are a lot of possibilities, I think, on the user interface, especially targeting non-technical or non-scientists, or maybe let's say we are going to scale this up a little bit, how to work with innovative interfaces in a new way. But there are probably more challenges than that, but that's what comes to mind first. Yeah. Or maybe you have some pointer. What was it? Something
no, I mean, I was also thinking in terms of ontologies, because you came in from the Basajaun project.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. So what I want to I show you a little bit on this kind of the procedure we had here in the Basajaun project, where we had a workshop and playing around just like this, and we are sending signals from our phones to this interactive environment, and I guess that. This is a really interesting way to engage everyone. So this is kind of a challenge as well. How we can engage the audience and make people participants to easily, to understand maybe some concepts that we can bring up. So in the Basajaun project, for example, we prepared an app for the session with the terms and stuff that we knew that they know about. So in that sense, we played that up in the session by pressing buttons and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is a challenge to involve people so that you can really get a good understanding of the problems. Yeah.
And so basically co-creating with people who are the potential users of the system, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yes, like
so
a co-creating session.
Yeah,
I call it like co-creation of information modeling when we did this kind of exercise in the Basajaun project. Yeah, so yeah, basically just do it together, try, press buttons, engage everyone. But it's still like a new idea, so we want to explore it. Yeah. Does it work? Is it giving some meanings? Yeah.
So basically, so Andreas is also working with ICF now as a result of getting first engaged through a use case in Onto Commons, and then he's now also part-time with us. And this is why I'm quizzing him how we're going to now set this up, because his job is to actually set up this kind of a test method during the prototyping week, so we can illuminate the subject matter with some new perspectives, basically, and have the potential users of ontologies who may not be ontology specialists start to understand them. So we're doing it through hands-on approach. And it's very much coming from the whole design background and the design methodology of how we do these things, because it's basically writing quick and dirty code, testing, prototyping, seeing the behavioral changes or the sort of renewed understanding, and then sort of seeing how we can illuminate the subject matter that way. So design is becoming a very interesting tool from that perspective.
Can I? I have two questions. One is very strongly related to what Mila was saying. We had a presentation earlier by Alexandra Simple on skills and what we need for making these ontologies happening. And maybe this is more for Mark and Lars. What would you think? What is your reaction to that? Did you think did it snap it to you like yes, design thinking maybe something that we need, especially for maybe the middle level? I don't know in detail, but would you see the role for designers for a different way of thinking in designing these systems? Because we saw at the end it's semantic, it's a very complex system here, and but we saw it with the presentation of Pedro or Tobias. At the end, there is some designing. Well, this is done by scientists probably, but maybe a different viewpoint would be beneficial. The second question instead is more for Christof, and because okay, you come from the fashion industry. You said that the fashion industry.
So my co-founder is coming from the fashion industry.
Correct.
Myself, I'm not from the fashion. I'm the CTO. I have an IT background. Yeah.
Correct. Then I meant you have experience with the indirect experience with the fashion industry, and you mentioned that they are mostly SMEs and might be very far away from all these technical discussions. So what do you think would be needed to mobilize SMEs, to mobilize ecosystem, traditional ecosystems such as the fashion, but I think also about construction. It's very similar at the end. There are also many SMEs and single person companies sometimes. So what do we need to mobilize these actors in an ecosystem that is larger, where data is shared, data is accessible, and how would this benefit also those actors? So 2 questions. Sorry if I was a bit too long.
That's a very good question. Okay,
Just go first. It's fresh, and I try to answer afterwards.
A very good question. I would say we have to at least give them the opportunity to get together and talk about, for example, transparency to them, and talk to them about how they would define their business, and then show them that they think differently, each of them, so that we have to come with a common language to define these things in a good way. Also bring them together with their suppliers and the companies underneath them, further down the supply chain. I think that's also an interesting way to show the differences in terminology and in the need for defining the ontologies. Yeah, that's how I would think at first sight. Yeah.
I hope I got your question right, but I would say from the design perspective, designers are in their original roots from their trade oriented to respond to the user needs in certain ways. That's also something Lars highlighted before. And if we look at such complex system as, for example, onto commons or material commons, to get all stakeholders on board, to have this different user perspectives and evaluate them in order to create the correct response. That is something, for example, where design could assist into creating the overall system, which is able to deliver the right responses to the right users. So on one hand, you have users from science. On the other hand, you have probably users at home purely interested to look up where and how their sneakers were made, etc., in order to make a basic purchase decision, etc. So if there is a common place which delivers these possible answers, the interfaces will be changing depending on the user needs. Does this cover?
Maybe adding on to that, I did another research project, interviewed a lot of textile companies and to see what their challenges are. And I was amazed that there were so different challenges, but a lot of competence within the areas. But when it comes to handling sustainability, there's so many aspects and so many different aspects. So I think it could be nice just to ask people what are the challenges. And there's a lot of information to gain from that. I think we simplify a bit. Also, I do when asking those questions. But I think it's go back to the user and the one that really works with those issues is interesting.
There is a online hand raised, so yeah, maybe.
Do I have to do something?
No. Maybe Alex?
Yeah, I just have to speak. So I want to do a comment and a question to pose to the panel. So the comment is, I agree whenever it comes to design, there is big competition and I don't want to share because it depends who rules the market in fashion, who has the color scheme, God knows what, yeah. The similar experience we have in pharmaceutical industry, who has a pill against cholesterol and whatever rules the world kind of things. But what they find out is a collaboration in a pre-competitive state, so before you go in. So what is your comment to this? Is there a good idea to get the domains in the design industry together, let them chat where the common pain points are, pre-competitive, what they want to sort, and then rope them in that way?
I'd say if we achieve to design together a future common place in order to share this data, where, for example, it could even be imaginable that different pharma companies are opting in and tearing down their silos and making the overall knowledge available even to their concurrent at a certain point, and new innovation can be built off the combination of it, then I think if the system is designed right and well, we will be able to succeed even in the even then when we are already in the market, because we built on a shared common of knowledge. And I think that's, at least from my personal conviction, I think that's the great target to achieve. And I think we have really to think about how we give it form that they are able to opt in from a commercial perspective, from an innovation perspective, from an advantage perspective to, in the overall field.
Yeah, because there's a good example. I think Unilever had at some point for the spray, let's say deodorant, they could develop these smaller cans. And what the pain point was the shelf space in the supermarket. So if I have a smaller product, I get more shelf space. And what they did is they shared the blueprints with other companies. So that was a win-win situation. So I think this is what we have to find. What's a win-win, but gives you an advantage in a common sense. Yeah. And the good news is if there is a market, that's great. It's harder to find a market. And then you have the classical red ocean, blue ocean problems. So I have to find a blue bit of the ocean to kind of like expand my business, but that doesn't mean that there is competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And but we also have to design the transition towards the future where it could work together in the future new market. Means also that, for example, the measuring instruments should be created newly in order to assess in the later state what makes sense also for the overall public.
But when it comes, if I can just add a bit as a designer over here, there is a tremendous amount that's actually changing for design when it comes to introducing data and data tracking into all of these systems. So there is, to begin with, you can test early adoption. So it used to be that we used to work in design in the way that in science you use TRLs, so technology readiness levels. So you used to go 1 to 9, and then you release the product, and then you're relieving yourself of the responsibility for the product from that point onwards. And this was kind of, in terms of design, we were appealing to the Platonian archetype in terms of like creating the best possible form for the purpose, for the brief, etc. This was the process. And then the marketing came in at that point, etc. You don't do that anymore. I mean, now if we have data at our disposal, we can engage early adopters in early stages of design, of all kinds of three-dimensional products as well as communication products, data-driven products. We can track and trace not just the development of products, but we can actually track and trace each single item that's being sent out to early adopters and follow its use. We never let our eyes off the full life cycle of that product. We can actually monitor its product narrative. Its product narrative starts to develop the moment that we give it to early adoption. We collect a tremendous amount of information about the product in the early adopter, and we can actually use early adopters as co-creators of the product, which actually builds product loyalty, right? So we have this tremendous value that we as designers can give to the data systems in terms of injecting it with a great deal of information, product narrative, and stories about provenance, for example, and about transparency. But at the same time, we can then also follow each single product as it goes out into its use and into reappropriation and sometimes misappropriation. Or rather, you know, there's lots of people who have used a Coke bottle as a vase and all the rest of it. I mean, this is, you know, this kind of thing happens. It's not anymore the product as conceived in this sort of archetypal way that designers used to be trained. So in terms of skills, now students need to think about the product that starts its life once it is released to the adopters, and think about its entire product life cycle and its multiple possible uses and repurposing and reappropriation, etc. So the training of designers changes tremendously in that sense. It is very, very different agenda, and it is all data assisted and data driven.
Thank you. I've got the sign that we must stop. Sorry. Let's take the discussion further, but during the apéro would be invited to.